The 1950s, that is. This was a heady time for the great British biker. Thousands of would-be brandos kick-started their dream machines and hit the tarmac in pursuit of adventure. And when they got tired of doing that, they stopped for a cuppa and a sandwich.
But there was one transport cafe that the rockers particularly loved. A mecca for all petrol heads, an icon to the biking fraternity, the Ace Cafe on the North Circular.
That's what it looked like then, and here it is today. A perfectly preserved piece of Americana, a taste of Route 66 just off the A406. It's had a few ups and downs over the years, but today the Ace is still serving up a reminder of the 50s to road-weary wild ones. I'm looking forward to a cup of something warming, but that'll have to wait, because part of the fun of places like this is taking a stroll through the parking lot to see who's in town. This is Michael, who first pulled up at the Ace in the early days.
When I first come to the Ace Cafe, it was 1954. I had an Aerial. That was the first bike I ever possessed.
Did you feel you were part of a tribe when you came down here?
I met people who were exactly the same as me. They were like a clan.
It was a feeling of freedom, presumably.
Absolutely, I totally agree. We used to go to Southend and, you know, all sorts of runs.
So did you get involved in any of the carry-on with the mods at the seaside?
Unfortunately, yeah, I did, but I didn't harm anybody.
Well, that's good to know. Michael's never lost his passion for bikes, but by the late 60s, many of his contemporaries were starting to feel their age. As they traded in their Nortons for something with 4 wheels and a heater, the allure of the Ace began to wear off, and it was finally forced to close. For a few years, this one-time bastion of teenage rebellion sold out completely and became a bookie's office. The odds of it ever reopening as a cafe looked slim. But then, a white knight rode onto the horizon with a quiff in his hair and a dream in his heart to bring back some rock and roll to the North Circular.
It came ultimately as a consequence of her interest in our heritage and our history. The challenge for me was not that it should be open, it was actually how on earth to do it. So I hadn't a clue. It took some while to fathom all that out, but the upshot is it's now here and open and serving egg on toast people.
The Ace finally put the kettle back on in 2001, serving up a modern take on a 50s classic.
So Mark, it looks beautifully restored to me, but how would this have differed in the old days?
In terms of the structure itself, column or pier we're under was originally a wall. This side of that wall was a restaurant. Youths, as they were referred to, were never allowed in that restaurant. They were only allowed in this part, which is the cafe. The counter is in exactly the same place, the kitchen's in exactly the same place.
Well, I reckon I need some of those authentic Ace Cafe sausages and mash, I reckon.
Bangers and mash, and I think 2 teas, please.
Bangers and mash and a cup of tea, that, my friends, is rock and roll.
So Mark, here we are, at the very heart of the most modern and old Ace Cafe, the jukebox.
We could have had an original one in here, but I'm told that they always used to break down, and if it's 40 years old, it'll break down even more. But it's got the right stuff on there, including rock and roll, and including, I think it's called ska and soul.
What that old nonsense. But of course, the history of the jukebox was, it was the only place people could come and hear those early rock and roll records.
Apparently, you could only hear rock and roll either on a jukebox in places like this, at cafe, or at fairgrounds. As this was, I understand, quite unique in that it was open 24 hours, London. Of course, kids would come and listen to their new music. What more could a 17-year-old want? Except his bike, of course.
And do you know anything of these record races I've heard tell?
The challenge, apparently, was to see who could put a record on the jukebox and then leave here up to junctions that now don't exist, up at Neasden and behind us to the west, Hanger Lane, and get back here. That, of course, produces carnage.
Before the record ended, yeah.
I'm pleased to say that's one tradition that died out a long time ago. But even for an old modernist like me, it's great to see this little piece of biker heaven still motoring on after all these years.
Southend or bust!